Hello, everyone. My name is Rob Higuerita, and I'm a Principal Technical Account Manager at AWS, and I'm based out of Austin, Texas. Welcome to AWS Supports You, where we share best practices and troubleshooting tips from AWS Support. Joining me today is Natalia from AWS Support. Can you give us a quick introduction, Natalia?
Hello, I'm Natalia, and I'm a specialist technical account manager based out in Dublin, Ireland. And I help our enterprise support customers with cloud operations and cost optimization best practices.
Great. Thanks for the introduction, Natalia, and thanks for joining us from all the way across the pond. So today we'll be introducing you to types of data networking transfer charges you may see on your AWS bill. We'll specifically focus on monitoring these charges in CostExplorer and optimization best practices. But before we get into the details, a quick note to the attendees online. Please feel free to use the chat window on the right-hand side of your screen to ask your questions of Natalia today. We really look forward to those questions and interacting with you all today. So Natalia, can you go ahead and walk us through what we're going to be talking about?
Yeah, thank you. So today we will cover a couple of topics. First, what data transfer is in the context of AWS networking, which types of data transfer there are, and most importantly, how they are charged. I'll also have a short demo to show you how to easily navigate the pricing pages. I will then show specific examples how to find and understand your data transfer charges using CostExplorer tool, and how to effectively use different filters and grouping options on the graph that can help you troubleshoot your usage. And lastly, I'll share some optimization tips and recommendations for data transfer and related services, and we'll provide examples of helpful tools and resources. So let's get started. Right, so data transfer happens when you cross boundaries in the network. Different activities may drive network communication across those boundaries, and that communication is measured and in some cases charged. So in terms of our network, since you've come to watch this presentation today, you are likely familiar with the concept of regions and availability zones in AWS Cloud. So currently our network is made up of 26 geographic regions and 84 availability zones. One of the latest regions was launched just recently in the last few weeks. Each region is made up of at least 2 availability zones, and usually more than that. And most of the discussion today will be around regions and availability zones. So let's look at examples of how data transfer occurs when workloads are deployed on AWS. So the primary way to get data in or out of AWS is over the internet. Let's say you have a video file in your S3 bucket in one of the AWS regions, and let's say you're downloading that file directly from S3 to your home laptop. Because the data needs to leave AWS and travel over the internet, you will then see data transfer out charges on your bill. And those charges vary depending on the AWS region. Note that first 100 gigabytes of data transfer out per month is free and is covered under free tier. Covered by limitations of free tier. And any data transfer into AWS from the internet is also free of charge. So if you decide to upload a large file into your S3 bucket, for example, you will later be charged for storage, for storing that data, but you will not be charged for data transfer in. Now let's look at data transfer between AWS regions. When EC2 instances, for example, in one region, communicate with AWS resources in another region, and it could be resources like S3 buckets or another EC2 instance. We call this inter-region data transfer, and there is a per gigabyte charge associated with that. It's important to note that we only charge for the outbound side of the communication between 2 AWS regions. So, for example, if the resource in AWS region 1 on this diagram is on the left, sends traffic to a resource in region 2, let's say on the right, the charge is assessed at the region 1 on the left side, where communication was initiated. And when the resource from region 2 is then responding, let's say, or replying to a resource in region 1, then the charge will be assessed at the region 2 on the right side. This is important because this per gigabyte cost varies by region, and we will see this later on the demo as well. Another type of data transfer charges is regional, or general type of data transfer is regional. Let's say there is an EC2 instance in one availability zone that talks to an EC2 instance in another availability zone. They are both part of the same region, but they've crossed that AZ boundary. In this case, they incur inter-AZ data transfer charges. That's charged in both directions on a per gigabyte basis. I'll discuss this topic a little later in the presentation, but essentially reducing your application communication across AZ boundaries is an important technique to reduce data transfer charges. Try to build your application so that the communication is contained within the single AZ, but then create multiple partitions of that application across AZs, so you can provide the redundancy that your application needs. And note that traffic within the same availability zone is free if resources communicate over private IP. And you will be charged per gigabyte both directions if they use public IP. Also, data transferred, data transferred between services like EC2 and other services like S3, RDS or Redshift, and others in the same availability zone is free. So, for example, if you have an application server on EC2 and you have a database on RDS, and then they are like in the same availability zone and they communicate with each other using private IP, this traffic will not be charged. It will be free. So it's important to understand what's driving your data transfer out to the internet. Data transfer out charges to the internet. If you find you are using data transfer out for serving a lot of content to the internet, you might want to investigate CloudFront service. CloudFront still incurs data transfer out cost for servicing content to the internet, but it may be cheaper than directly from EC2 out to the internet. Plus, you get the benefit of a better user experience by serving content from edge locations, which are closer to your end users. CloudFront also has free tier, and it's even better than EC2. So first 1 terabyte of data transfer out per month is free. And in terms of communication between CloudFront, CloudFront edge location and the origin, or we call it a backend resource. It could be an EC2 instance, it could be a load balancer or an S3 bucket. There is a charge associated with, when traffic goes from CloudFront in response to the origin. So we will get back to that and we will see that on the demo as well. Last example, let's say you need to get data to and from your data center. Many customers are using Direct Connect for that purpose. Direct Connect service has its own pricing page that I recommend checking to see how you're charged. For example, there is a data processing charge for data that is egressing or leaving AWS and going over, from AWS to Direct Connect location. And it is also metered per gigabyte. But in the context of data transfer charges, networking charges, I'll say that you will only see data transfer out charges for traffic that is leaving AWS region and goes into Direct Connect, and the cost for outbound data, the cost for outbound traffic varies by region, and also it varies by Direct Connect location. And similarly, like any other type of data transfer charges, so any traffic that is coming into AWS Cloud, like for example, from Direct Connect location into AWS Cloud, it will not be charged. It will be free. So yeah, in the majority of cases, anything coming into AWS or into your resources, it's free. Anything coming out is charged. Again, unless it's within the same availability zone using private IPs. Okay, so I would like to show a demo how one can navigate different service pricing pages and how you can see it on AWS portal and find information on how different services are charged in terms of data transfer. So let's roll a demo and see. All right. So every service is charged across multiple dimensions. Let's look at the EC2 example and on the pricing page. First pricing dimension that we see here is the hourly rate for running EC2 instances. The cost will differ depending on the region. For example, running a T2 Micro Linux in one region will cost you differently than running the same instance in a different region. And it works the same with the data transfer charges. So when we scroll down here on the pricing page, so as you see, you can first select the region in which you run or are planning to run your resources. Let's just leave it Northern Virginia for now. And this will be the originating region from where traffic is going or where the resources are located. Now you can see the same categories of data transfer charges as I already showed on the slides. And as you can see, all the traffic that is coming in to Amazon EC2 from the internet is free, and any traffic going out to the internet is charged. Data transfer out has tiered pricing, and there is a free tier of 100 gigabytes of traffic per month across multiple regions that you can send out from AWS to internet for free. After you use free tier limits, you are charged depending on the region and depending on the volumes of traffic you spend per month. Essentially, the more you use, the less you pay. There's also different pricing for sending traffic between AWS regions, and this table shows how much you pay per gigabyte of traffic if you send it from Northern Virginia to any of these other regions. Note that transferring data from EC2 to CloudFront edge location will be free. So we will come back to this point later, and we have some additional useful information about data transfer pricing on this page. So let's take a look. I will also talk about this later in the presentation, but another type of data transfer traffic, that you can see is the regional between availability zones. Keep in mind that most AWS services will use the same pricing and same categories of data transfer as EC2. So for example, if you wanted to estimate how much you'll pay for traffic that you send out to the internet from your Elastic Load Balancer, the pricing will be the same as EC2 instances, or NAT gateway as well. Now back to the point about CloudFront. I mentioned that data transfer from the origin, like EC2 instance, for example, to CloudFront edge location is free. But CloudFront service has its own pricing, and it also has certain free tier limits. From the perspective of data transfer out to the internet, CloudFront has 10 times higher limits than EC2, and many customers can save a lot of money just on this. Note that data transfer categories for CloudFront are a little bit different. First, you are charged for the traffic that's leaving CloudFront and going out to the internet. And the pricing depends on the geographic area of the edge location rather than the AWS region. So the pricing is also tiered. And it means that the more you use, the less you'll pay. And another data transfer dimension that we can see here, and that's the one we also mentioned in the presentation, is traffic from CloudFront to the origin, which is back to the backend resource, like EC2 instance or S3 bucket. You are charged for traffic from CloudFront to the origin. So for example, if you have resources in EU Ireland region and you use one of the edge locations in Europe just to serve traffic closer to your users, you will be charged for data transfer based on the pricing on the Europe and Israel. So I hope this helps you understand how to navigate the pricing page and find related information. Now we can get back to the presentation. And before we do that, let's check if we have any questions in the chat. Rob?
Hey, Natalia, thanks. So we did have a question. I think you just kind of clarified on it, though, for the CloudFront pricing. So I did have a question myself. How can customers estimate their data transfer charges, provided that they know which services and resources they're going to use in which regions? Is there a way that we can do that?
AWS pricing calculator will be the best tool for that. We can later paste a link in the chat for that.
Okay.
Yeah, like if you know where your resources are or where you plan to deploy your resources, then you will have the region and you'll be able to see how much you pay for data transfer in that region, whether it's internet traffic or traffic between AWS regions or within the same AWS region. Yeah, AWS pricing calculator.
Great, thanks, Natalia. Yeah, I'll post a link into the chat here for the AWS pricing calculator so they can take a look at that. I'll turn it back over to you for the rest of your presentation. Thank you.
Okay, great, thank you. Let's see, so we can get back to the presentation now. Okay, so now we know about different types of data transfer, types of traffic that are happening, depending on where your AWS resources are deployed. So let's see now how you can monitor them in CostExplorer. And we will later have a demo about it as well. So you will be able to see, how you can apply different filters and different grouping options in CostExplorer to dive deeper into your usage and cost. Okay, so first type of data transfer charges that we were talking about were internet traffic. So one thing to keep in mind that simplifies it is that any traffic that is coming into AWS from the internet is free. So any AWS charges in will be free, and any traffic that is coming out to the internet from the region, regardless of the resources, you will pay some fees for that. So specifically in CostExplorer, you'll see that later on the demo as well. So there are some grouping options and some filters. So what you might need to find is the filter called usage type. And there are other filters like services. Like, for example, you can filter out specific services and watch your usage and charges throughout the month. But when you search for usage type, then you will find specific values like data transfer out bytes or data transfer in bytes. So just take a moment to kind of remember this one, because we'll get back to this on the demo. So this is how you would be searching for the usage and cost related data for the traffic that is coming into AWS from the internet or going outside to the internet. Another one is traffic between AWS regions. So there's also a pretty simple way how you can find this information in CostExplorer. And just for simplicity, I'll show this diagram before, and again, we'll talk about this on the demo. So I guess, as you can see here, like let's say, for example, we have some resources in region 1, let it be as 3 buckets, and we have some resources in region 2, could be EC2 instances, load balancers, or any other resources. So any traffic that is going into the region, regardless of which side, region 1 or region 2, any traffic coming inside the region will be free. So data transfer in, $0, and same here, data transfer in, $0, regardless of the AWS regions. And then data transfer out, you will be charged, and same here. And the charges will vary depending on the originating region from where the traffic is going. So similarly, in CostExplorer, you would search for a filter called usage type, and you would search for values like AWS out bytes or AWS in bytes. So in the previous slide, we had it was called data transfer out bytes, data transfer in bytes. That's for internet traffic. And for traffic between 2 AWS regions, AWS out bytes, AWS in bytes. Again, hopefully it will be easier when you see it on the demo. And another one, the regional traffic inside the same AWS region. So there are a couple of scenarios here. So I wanted to spend a bit more time just to explain it. Let's talk about the simple one. Like, let's say, as a simple example, you have 2 EC2 instances inside the same availability zone, and they communicate with each other. If they're in the private subnet, for example, and they use private IP to communicate, then you will not pay anything for the data transfer. However, if for any reason you are using public IP to communicate between those 2 instances, even though they are still in the same availability zone, you will actually be charged. How you are going to be charged? You will basically be charged the same fees as if you were sending traffic between 2 different availability zones in the same region. And yeah, right. So just to sort of talk about this one just once again, if it's in the same availability zone, using private IP free, using public IP charged. If it's between two different availability zones, you are still charged, and you are charged both directions on both sides. So let's say you have an instance in here, the top AZ, let's say, and you have an instance of the bottom AZ. If they talk, you will see charges on both sides, on both directions. So that's one of the good techniques how you could optimize your data transfer charges if you could place your resources in the same availability zone, that you wouldn't really need to send traffic across AZs if the use case allows. And another example, so let's say we have another VPC, and you create a peering connection between two different VPCs. And as you probably know, a VPC can span across two different availability zones. So depending on which resources are in which AZ, you will also be charged differently. So if the traffic is going through the peering connection into a different VPC, again, if it's in the same AZ, then yeah, you are not charged anything. And if it's across AZs, in and out, you will be charged. So essentially, you need to remember three things here. Regardless if you are using peering connection or what or not. First, if it's inside same availability zone using private IP, it's free. If it's in the same availability zone using public IP, you're charged. And if it's in between two different availability zones in the region, you're also charged. So those three scenarios, they fall under the regional traffic category. And if in CostExplorer you want to monitor those charges or investigate them, troubleshoot them further, again, you search for the usage type filter. But in this case, you are searching for data transfer regional bytes. Yeah, so we'll see that on the demo as well. Let's see if you have any additional questions.
Hey, Natalia. Yeah, so we do have a question. I've been having a conversation with AHAFEEZ. Had a follow-up question through the conversation I just want to get some clarity on. Essentially, they're wondering, is the pricing only based on the CloudFront edge location pricing for CloudFront as far as the data transfer?
So for data transfer for CloudFront, it mostly depends, on the edge location, in which region the edge location is located. So yeah, if it's like on my example in the demo, I had, I think, Europe-Israel zone. And then like if you have edge location somewhere in Americas, so yeah, the data transfer price will depend on that region, on that geographic area.
Okay. Great. Thanks for clarifying that. And I did have just one more question for myself. You're talking about the different availability zones and such and mapping those or finding those. How do we find the mappings for those different availability zones in our accounts?
Yeah, all right. So let's say, for example, well, okay, to answer this question, I'll probably just talk about a scenario. So if you, for example, have two different AWS accounts, right, and then you're trying to create some sort of peering between them, and then you would like to know how exactly you're going to be charged for regional traffic or not charged. So as you probably know that, or maybe you don't know, so I'll tell you about this. So it's likely that if you look at the logical zone names, like for example, US East 1A or EU West 1B, they might differ from one account to another. So if you're trying to create some sort of peering, and then let's say you send traffic from one account, US East 1A, to another account or to the resource in US East 1A, you might end up receiving regional charges. The reason for that could be because those logical zone names will be different on two different accounts, and they will map to different zone IDs. So you can find on your account what is the mapping between the logical names and between zone IDs. Zone ID will be something like US E1-AZ1, and those zone IDs are the same on all accounts. To look for that mapping, you can check in EC2 console, or you can use the Describe Availability Zones API to see that mapping. And then if you want to create this sort of peering between two different accounts, and you want to be sure that you send traffic, let's say, within the same physical availability zone, then you need to be sure that you're using the same zone ID on both.
Great, thanks. Yeah,
Makes
that's
sense?
really helpful. Yeah, no, that's very
Yeah.
helpful to know to correlate those and how to find that using those tools. So thanks. Back over to you for the rest of the presentation. Thanks.
Okay, let's see. So we have one more slide about CloudFront, and we'll go to another demo. So yeah, we were talking about CloudFront previously, right? And essentially, any traffic that is going outside to the internet, it's charged, and any traffic that's coming from the internet into CloudFront edge location will be free. So the way how you look for this particular traffic that CloudFront is sending to your end users, for example, it's kind of similar in CostExplorer, like just general data transfer out to the internet. You search for filter called usage type, and you search for data transfer out bytes, data transfer in bytes, depending on which one you're looking for. However, there are a few additional traffic types that are sent to and from CloudFront, and this is mostly related to traffic between CloudFront and the origin. So if you want to see the traffic from CloudFront edge location that is going into the origin backend resources like EC2 instances or load balancers, you will search for usage type, and you will search for value called data transfer out O bytes. So that is a very specific one. It kind of looks similar like data transfer out bytes, which is the general internet traffic, where it adds like O in here before bytes. And this is just a very specific type of traffic. That's the traffic that's coming from CloudFront edge location back to the origin. So you can essentially see how much your CloudFront edge location is sending traffic in response to the origin. And then if you wanted to look how much traffic is going in between, let's say, S3 and CloudFront, if you wanted to separate between load balancers, your EC2 instances, and S3 buckets, let's say if you have a couple of different backend resources, and if you want to separate them, you could look at that as well. Again, similarly, checking filter usage type and searching for CloudFront out bytes and CloudFront in bytes. Usually, this tool will be 0. They will be free because you will look from the perspective of the origin. So when you're looking from the perspective of the origin, like any traffic to and from CloudFront will be free. So again, I'll show it on the demo, so it probably will make a bit more sense. Let's see. I'll just prepare it, and let's get to CostExplorer and roll the demo and get more familiar with it. So I'm now in CostExplorer, and most of you are probably familiar with it, but if not, you can find it in the services menu in the AWS Cost Management category. Note that if you're using IAM, Identity and Access Management, to access your account, and you get like a permissions error when you access CostExplorer, you need to ensure that it's enabled and your IAM user or role has the policy to view CostExplorer. And if your account is a member of AWS organization, then your management payer account needs to enable access to CostExplorer in the preferences. Now a scenario. So let's say I want to analyze and compare my data transfer charges for 3 months between September and November, because I've been growing my usage. And I'll first go and select the time frame, and then I'm going to use filters. If you remember from the last few slides in the presentation, we need a filter usage type. Right. First, I'd like to analyze the data transfer charges out to the internet and which services are generating them. So I'll go here and search for data transfer out bytes. And it will show me all outbound traffic, all the usage types where the prefix will stand for the AWS region. And in this case, it's like an originating region from where you're sending that traffic. So I wanted to show an example. If you find data transfer out bytes without the prefix, so that will stand for Northern Virginia region. That's the one we launched first. And EU is EU Ireland region. So just yeah, wanted to mention that. So let's say we will select everything, and now we see the total monthly usage in gigabytes at the bottom graph, and the cost at the top. Let's say this is an unexpected spike that I'd like to troubleshoot further. So I'll go and change the granularity to daily, and now I will know when the spike started. Yeah. So to see which services are responsible for these charges, I will group my usage by service. And then let's also minimize the time frame and just for better visibility, just make it smaller. And now I will know that one of my CloudFront distributions is responsible for the spike. Depending on what's been happening in my application around this time, this could explain the growth in usage. I also see other services and resources that generate data transfer out traffic. CostExplorer will only show top 5 services on the graph, and to see the remaining services, you can just scroll down in the table, or you can download it in the CSV format. Now, similarly, let's say now I want to see how much data transfer in I'm getting from the internet. So I'm going back to my usage type filter. I'll remove all the current selection, and I will just search for data transfer in bytes. So if you remember, I mentioned that all the traffic into AWS from internet is free. Just, okay, 1 second, data transfer in bytes, yeah. So yeah, we will just select all, and yeah, we can confirm that all the traffic in is free. You can see the usage at the bottom in gigabytes, and the cost will be at the top, which is 0. So let's say I see this spike on the 9th of November, and I'd like to know what happened. So I'll find the date down there in the table, and I'll scroll it just to see the services. Yeah, there it is. So it looks like someone has uploaded 98 gigabytes to one of my S3 buckets on that date, or a couple of buckets. And in case I have a couple of different buckets in different regions, so I would like to troubleshoot it further, and then I'll go and apply this filter S3, and I will just drill down a little bit, and I will group by region instead. So yeah, now I can see that yeah, the upload happened into a bucket in Oregon region. Yeah. Note that CostExplorer will not have the breakdown of cost by individual S3 buckets. And if you need this level of granularity of details of cost and usage, then cost and usage report is a better tool for this. We can maybe share a link to the documentation about cost and usage report. So let's now check how to monitor data transfer costs for services that send traffic between AWS regions. Let's clear out the filters and groupings. We will go to usage type filter, and we will search for AWS out bytes to see which services are communicating with resources in another AWS region. Yeah, again, and the first few letters will correspond to the originating region, and the next few letters will be like the region that is accepting the traffic. So when grouping by services, I will see a couple of those services, one of which is EC2 other. So that's an interesting one. So I would like to actually copy this one, and I want to filter EC2 other in the services. So I'll go to service filter and apply it. And I will apply a different grouping. I'll group it by API operation. So from this, what I can tell that my inter-region traffic is mostly associated with peering VPCs in different AWS regions. Yeah, VPC peering out, and also sending traffic over this channel, and also copying my EBS snapshots to another AWS region. And it looks like October 30th is the biggest one when I was just copying some snapshots over to another region. So similarly, I can find usage related to inter-region traffic that is coming in. So yeah, in this example, we will have AWS in bytes. We will search for this, and there should be no charges associated with traffic that is coming into AWS region. Yeah, same here. But you can see the usage below in the graph in gigabytes. Yeah, you can still see the usage here. Now, one of the biggest opportunities for cost optimization for our customers is often in the inter-AZ or this regional data transfer space. One of the latest slides that I had. So to filter out our inter-AZ traffic, we will go back to the usage type and we will search for regional bytes. So that's essentially traffic between availability zones or inside availability zone. We will search for regional bytes. We will just select all. And in most cases, EC2 other will be the top contributor if we group by the service. Let's filter it out in the services, and we will do similar what we just did before. So we will filter EC2 other, and we will group by API operation. So I wanted to show how you can balance the grouping and filtering and just to troubleshoot. So these top two operations tell me that the charges are related to different EC2 instances located in different availability zones of the same AWS region, and they communicate with each other. Some charges are also related to traffic that goes over VPC peering in the same region, but potentially between different availability zones as well. Or it can be traffic traveling within the same AZ, but using public IP. Yeah, so you can see that's on the graph here. So if this is by design and this is what you were intended to do and you need to have this kind of setup, that's fine. However, it's good to be aware of these charges and which resources are generating them. So let's just filter out interzone out and interzone in traffic in here. You can filter API operation as well. So that's when it becomes interesting. If you tag your EC2 instances and you enable tag keys for cost allocation, you will be able to group this usage by tags, and then you can dive deeper into which specific applications or resources are generating this traffic. Like for example, if I tag a cluster of EC2 instances with the value like TB11, and then I enable that tag key for cost allocation, I'll see this usage and charges associated with that cluster in here in CostExplorer. And lastly, I wanted to go back to CloudFront and just talk a little more about it. If you remember from the presentation, I was saying that any traffic that comes into CloudFront is free, including traffic sent by the origin, like backend EC2 instances or load balancers or S3 buckets. But any traffic leaving CloudFront is charged. So let's check it. If we search for data transfer out O bytes, so as the usage type, yeah, let's just select all. This should show me total bytes transferred from CloudFront edge location to my origin in response to delete, options, patch, or post and put requests. In my example, I just don't have any, and it means that probably in the last few months, I only use CloudFront to serve content to my end customers, which will be reflected in the data transfer out charges. Yeah, let's see. If you wanted to check the traffic that's going from the origin to the CloudFront, to the CloudFront edge location, and let's say if you wanted to see it from each individual service, like each individual service perspective, like if you wanted to separate your report between S3 and EC2, you can search for CloudFront in bytes or CloudFront out bytes. So yeah, in my example, it looks like I mostly use EC2 instances as backend resources. And yeah, I can drill down this report even further and check it by tags. If I group by tag name, I can see which individual EC2 instances or groups are actually generating some of these charges. Okay, let's see if we can go back to presentation. But before this, I think we can check if there are any questions in the chat.
Thanks, Natalia. Appreciate that. So I do have an additional question for you here based on kind of what you're showing for the data transfer usage. If we wanted additional like information over just the cost and usage data, like we want to know the source and destination for traffic, example, like the IP address of the specific, resource. Can I see this information anywhere in CostExplorer or other billing and usage data?
No, not exactly. If you want to know why data transfer is happening, you may want to investigate it at the network level.
Mhm.
So you can do it using VPC flow logs. And again, we probably can send a link to the documentation in the chat.
Okay.
And you can enable VPC flow logs for a whole VPC or for a subnet or only specific network interface. So essentially what VPC flow logs is, it's like a packet capture, but like a very aggregated version of packet capture. So for a period of time, you'll be able to see traffic that is going from a specific source to a specific destination. It has source IP, destination IP, source port, destination port, and a bunch of other information. So one thing to note is that VPC flow logs will not have like cost data associated with them. But if you needed to create that like specific dashboard to view everything in one place, you could merge VPC flow logs, for example, with cost and usage report. Cost and usage report will have all this granular data about your hourly cost and usage. You could merge them and then query them using Athena, for example. And then you'll be able to see sort of traffic like with the source and destination and cost and usage on an hourly basis.
Great, thanks, Natalia. Appreciate that. Yeah, and I did post a link to actually the well-architected labs, the data transfer summary dashboard they can use for cost and usage reports, since we were talking about cost and usage reports. So you can check that out as well. But I'll turn it back over to you for the rest of your presentation. So thank you.
Yeah, great. And well, essentially, the last section in the presentation was around optimization tips and some recommendations. So I hope a lot of you will find this information useful too on how to optimize your usage, specifically data transfer related. So first, I wanted to talk about some tips around transferring data within AWS region between different resources. So it's one of the common mistakes that some of the customers are making. Like we assume, well, like by default, we say that traffic within the region from between EC2 instances and other services like S3, it's free. However, some customers make a mistake that they don't use VPC endpoints. Essentially, well, specifically for DynamoDB and for S3 service, you need to use gateway VPC endpoints to make sure that the communication from EC2 to those services is happening within the region and you're not charged for it. And yeah, the gateway VPC endpoints will help you with that, will help you achieve that. We have more information about VPC endpoints in our documentation, so I suggest checking it out. And especially if you have workloads that use EC2, where you use EC2 service and you also use DynamoDB or S3, and they need to communicate with one another, then yeah, it makes sense to just take a look at this, and potentially you could save quite some money on just eliminating this data transfer charges. So some of the general recommendations that I have is to use private IPs where possible, especially if the resources are in the same availability zone. And even if it's something like, let's say you have a NAT gateway and you're sending, you're routing your traffic from your EC2 instance that is in the public subnet, the EC2 instance in the private subnet, but you need to reach internet, so you're going through NAT gateway that is located in the public subnet, and let's say they are in different availability zones, so you're actually charged for that cross AZ traffic. But then if, let's say, that gateway is in the same AZ, then your EC2 instance, yeah, you will not be charged for that traffic if you use private IP. So just as an example. And as I mentioned, so depending on the service, you can use VPC endpoints. And specifically DynamoDB or S3, using gateway VPC endpoints can help save quite some dollars or save some money. Yeah, and as I mentioned, an example with the NAT gateways and placing them in the same availability zones with backend instances where possible and if it makes sense. Because with NAT gateways, there is other charges associated with it, like you actually pay an hourly fee for NAT gateways. when it's up and running. So even if you don't have any backend instances, you are still charged for it. So you just, depending on your architecture and your use case, if it makes sense for you to create a couple of NAT gateways in different availability zones, so that your backend instances would be sending traffic through NAT gateways, would be routing traffic through NAT gateways in the same AZ, you could save some money on inter-AZ traffic. And cross-AZ load balancing, depending on which load balancers you are using, you could also save some cost on that. I suggest checking our FAQ page about load balancers. Essentially, like if it's classic or application load balancer that you're using, then cross-AZ traffic will not be charged. And also, cross-region data usage. One of the common mistakes that some customers are making is often between EC2 and S3, where let's say they have EC2 in one region, and then they create an S3 bucket, and they go to S3 console and accidentally create that bucket in a different region. They start sending traffic and they start getting charged, which is sometimes unexpected. So yeah, that's a good idea to just review that, in advance. Make sure that if you want to EC2 instances and S3 buckets to, send communication, and if it, again, makes sense from your application perspective, then have them in one region. CloudFront as well. So we talked about CloudFront a bit before. So one of the most common examples where CloudFront service is applicable, again, depending on your use case and type of your application, if you are sending a lot of traffic out to the internet from S3 or ELB, and especially if the services are used to serve some content to your end users, could be like large video files, for example, then it really makes sense to use CloudFront because you could save some money on that. And just as an example of what I mean by large data transfer out charges, or large amounts of traffic that you can send to the internet. So just let's say you have 10 terabytes of S3 storage in Northern Virginia region, and you need to copy that amount of data to a destination that will generate internet traffic. So you can, again, use calculator, AWS pricing calculator, just to estimate those charges. But on this specific example, like if you were to send the data from S3 directly to the internet, you'd pay about $900. And if you were doing the same thing but using CloudFront, you would pay less for data transfer. I'd like to note that you will have some additional charges potentially for other charges for CloudFront distributions, because CloudFront has other pricing dimensions that you're also charged for. But what you could also do, if you have like really large amounts of traffic that you need to send, and you could use the CloudFront savings bundle. And again, the information is on our CloudFront pricing page, so you can read more about it. And with a CloudFront savings bundle, you could save even additionally up to 30% on, if you are ready to commit to a certain amount of traffic that you are going to send every month. So if this is continuous. And just as general information, not exactly related to data transfer, but related to services that can potentially generate high traffic. From ELB perspective, we always recommend limiting unused load balancers across availability zones because you are paying unnecessarily for them, or disabling any load balancers that don't have any healthy backend instances or don't have backend instances at all. Because essentially, you're not really using a load balancer, but it's still hanging around and you are paying this hourly rate. Trusted Advisor as a tool can help with that, to identify some of them. And also generally in your EC2 console, like you can probably see, or you probably should know which load balancers you are using and which you don't use. From S3 perspective, compressing data to reduce data transfer size, that's a good idea as well, just because, again, you compress the data, you have less data to transfer, you pay less. As I mentioned in this example, using CloudFront for large data transfer out use cases could be a good idea for some application types. We also have a lot of different useful tools and resources that can help you troubleshoot services In addition to CostExplorer for monitoring and troubleshooting, there are services like AWS budgets or anomaly detection in CostExplorer that you can use to basically get notified when you reach certain threshold of usage or cost. But in addition to this, it's really helpful to have cost allocation tags enabled because they give you quite granular view of your cost and usage in your billing reports. So to visualize data transfer cost effectively in CostExplorer specifically, you should consider configuring cost allocation tags. Well, they're not required, but they are a great tool to help you label resources with metadata that is relevant to your business. So as I showed on the demo, you can use these tags to filter information that you see in CostExplorer. And once you tag the resources and enable the tag keys for cost allocation, those tags will be available in CostExplorer to filter and group your data by the dimensions of your tags. And also, I think Rob posted a link to this one in the chat. So some customers would like to have more options and flexibility to be able to customize how they visualize data transfer, networking data transfer in AWS. And if you are such customer, you can use cost and usage reports, and you can create customized dashboards in many popular analytics tools. For example, to help you get started, we've published guidance on how to use Amazon Athena and Amazon QuickSight to ingest the cost and usage report data into them and then build dashboards using that data. Yeah, so that's some of the tips and tricks and recommendations. I think we published a couple of links in the chat throughout the presentation. We still have some time for questions. Let's see.
Hi, Natalia. Thanks. Yes, and all those links that Natalia has presented today are in the chat, so make sure to grab those. Just kind of summary of these. But thanks, Natalia. No current questions from the audience, but everyone today, really, we looked at AWS data transfer and how to optimize and monitor your data transfer in AWS. If there are any questions that were not answered today, you can repost or post those questions on repost.aws and email us any feedback to awssupportsyou@amazon.com. We want to hear from you. Tell us what else you'd like to see on the show, and thank you for joining us at AWS Supports You, and happy cloud computing.
Thank you.